Okay, apparently we are live. We are live. Hello, hello, hello. How's everyone doing? Thank you for joining me on another live stream. Yesterday's one seemed to go fairly well. A lot of good feedback. A lot of people participated during the live stream and a lot of comments after the live stream. So thank you very much for all that. I believe I've figured out some of the issues with the webcam. The only thing is I will be having to do a few auto adjusts. Yep, chat seems to be working, everything seems to be working. So the thing now is, before it's on auto focus, which doesn't seem to work, or at least not very well, so I will manually focus, like so. And that seems to do the trick. So I can say we are going to have, hopefully, a much better live stream. So, yeah, thank you all for joining again. Today we're going to be talking about dive watches. So I have brought out a selection of dive watches on the table that we will be discussing. Obviously, feel free to ask any questions in regards to and I will happily answer. But just to give some more structure compared to the last episode, we're going to talk about dive watches. So on the table, a nice range of watches from very affordable micro brands up to sort of the top realm, or towards the top realm. Obviously there's much higher level dive watches than the Rolex Submariner, but sort of everything in between as well. And we're just going to discuss different styles of dive watches, what they have to offer and things like that, and we'll sort of take it from there. So yeah, hello Peter Smith, hello William, how you doing? How's everyone doing today? Hope you're all doing well. We apparently have a heat wave coming in the UK this weekend, so that's going to be interesting, especially considering we're all locked inside, which is fun. But yeah, in regards to dive watches, one thing I really want to cover straight off the bat is depth rating, and it's something that I have spoke about before, and I used to speak about regularly at retail and at auction and everywhere I've ever worked, really. So depth rating, when you have a watch that states a certain depth on the dial, let's get another one on hand to show what I mean. So when you have a watch that has a depth rating on the dial, as you can see on both of these, if I can get it in focus a bit better. Again guys, you'll have to forgive me, I'm working with very limited resources here. I mean, I'm literally using a webcam and having to manually focus. So hello Neville, how you doing? Hello, hello. Glad you got the focus sorted. Yeah, manually focusing, so can't complain. But one thing I wanted to talk about in this initially is depth rating. So on a watch you will have the rating that is that the watch is rated to for depth, right? So a lot of people, when they see that, they assume, let's take this Laurier for example, that on the dial it says 200 meters. As you can see, 660 feet. Now, a lot of people look at that and assume that means this watch can go 200 meters underwater. That is actually incorrect. What it means is the watch is rated to a pressure depth of 200 meters. Now, something I used to talk about a lot at retail, and the analogy I always used to use was a power shower. So a power shower, or like a powerful shower, which is what a power shower is, can produce anywhere between 20 and 40 meters of water depth pressure. So that gives you a good idea that just because a watch says it's 50 meters water resistant, and this more refers to non-dive watches, so watches without a screw down crown, without pressure rating, all that kind of stuff. An average watch will have a rating 30, 50, sometimes even 100 meters on them. It doesn't actually mean that watch can go down 50 meters underwater. So if you are diving a 20 meter recreational dive, you cannot wear your 50 meter water resistant watch, because it is not water resistant to 50 meters. It's water resistant to 50 meters of pressure. So it's a very different thing. That's something I just wanted to cover straight off the bat about dive watches, common misconception, which I have seen many times, and I've seen people come in, especially at retail, with their watch and gone, I went diving or I went swimming with this and it's got water in it and it's apparently 50 meters water resistant. And you have to sort of go over the rudimentary explanation of it's not actually water resistant to 50 meters. So that's something I just wanted to cover straight off the bat, and a common misconception about dive watches and watches in general, regardless of dive watches. So yeah, I'm doing well, thanks buddy, glad to see you keeping well too. Thank you William. Yep, just keeping busy during all this, playing around with watches, you know how it is. So Key characteristics of dive watches. Obviously, mostly screw down crown. For a proper dive watch, you will have a screw down crown, like so. A screw down crown that you can use and screw back down. You will have a diving rotating bezel, typically. Now, not all divers will have this, but a true diver should always have a rotating bezel, which only rotates one way. The reason being, a lot of you know, is because when you're diving, you would set this. So let's say we were going to go for a 15-minute dive, which is how long our oxygen will last. So what you'd do, you'd set the bezel initially to where your minute hand is, and then you'd go 15 minutes from there. So what would technically happen now is, as you're diving, you would keep an eye on where your minute hand is in relation to the bezel pip. That indicates 15 minutes of time is up. Now, if you're diving, chances are you have a dive computer and everything like that, and that is what you would rely on. You would not rely on your watch, ideally. Most people don't even actually dive with a watch, truthfully. So that's the reason a dive bezel is important, and the reason it only turns one way is because if you was to turn it, I went the wrong way, by the way, guys. You're supposed to do it the opposite way as a time down. But if the bezel moved the wrong way whilst you're diving, you're going to add time to your dive, which is obviously very bad, because if you are relying on this and you have knocked it without realizing, and all of a sudden you've added 10 minutes of time and you only actually have 10 minutes left of oxygen, you would, yeah, you did that, I know. Thanks, Kevin. I did it backwards, I realised, sorry guys. Most of you get the point. But if you knocked it the wrong way, you would add time to your dive, which would be very detrimental, and obviously you'd probably die, so you don't want that. So that's why it only turns one way. Next important thing on most dive watches, every single one on the table has it, is lume. So lume, luminescent paint. Obviously most of them now use super luminova and everything like that. And what it would do, it will glow in the dark. Very, very simple and important for diving. Now, that's the sort of basics of diving watches. Obviously, there are other things like helium escape valves and things like that. That's for when you do saturation diving, and helium is a very, very small molecule that gets in everything. It gets in your watch, it gets in you personally. And if you was to go deep sea diving, where you're in mixed pressurized gases, and you was to come straight up after diving within that, you would pretty much explode. I can't remember the exact name for it, but your heart and lungs and everything have the chance to explode, and you get what's called the bends, which is where your blood just goes all weird and everything like that because it's got helium in it. That's why they have to come up in stages. So the same with a watch, really, apart from you would release the helium through the helium escape valve on this watch, or most watches have a helium escape valve in the case itself, like the Rolex Sea Dweller, Deep Sea, and a lot of the others where it automatically releases the helium. So those are things to think about if you are actually diving with your watches. What kind of diving are you doing? Most people recreationally dive, so they don't go more than 20 to 40 meters usually. I think it's even less than that some cases. So most dive watches will do perfectly fine for what it is you're doing, and if you are diving beyond that, chances are you're using a dive computer and you're probably not going with a watch. So yeah. Now in regards to what we've got on the table, we've got a massive range of styles. So that's sort of where it comes down to. Most people, like myself, don't dive. We just wear dive watches because we like the way they look. So one of my personal watches on the table is my Seiko Turtle. An absolutely cool watch. Comes on a bracelet, everything like that. It has a diver extension as well, which is a bit rudimentary on the Seiko compared to some other brands. But yeah, it's a cool watch, really cool watch. Has everything you'd need if you were to go diving with your watch. I've been considering a diver, but I do prefer smaller cases. So my picks are out of the Oris Diver 65 36mm, a mid-size Seamaster, 36mm Tudor Sub, or a 35mm Yachtmaster. Okay, so fair enough. You prefer smaller watches. I prefer smaller watches as well. Now, one thing I would say is make sure you try on smaller dive watches, because a lot of the time they wear a hell of a lot smaller than the actual size. Now, one thing to consider when you've got a dive watch is the size. So whilst this is on paper a 40mm watch, so from this point to this point it is 40mm. So if you prefer 36mm watches, you're looking at that going, that is a big watch. But what you got to remember is the dial size. So the dial size on this watch, I'm not exactly sure how big it is, but I believe it's around 35-36mm, the actual dial. So the actual part that your eyes are drawn into on most dive watches, because of the bezel and everything like that, your eyes get drawn inwards. Now because of that, they might be a 40mm watch, but they don't necessarily wear big. So there you can see the Submariner on my wrist. Granted, it definitely looks bigger than a 36mm watch. I'm not trying to say it's it wears the same as a 36mm watch. That's not what I'm saying at all. But your eyes are drawn inwards. So when you're used to wearing, let's say, a 36mm Datejust, which is mostly dial, and you put on a 36mm Submariner, your eyes are drawn inwards. So to your eyes, it actually looks a hell of a lot smaller than a 36mm Datejust. So that's something to keep in mind. Now some people don't mind that, but the smaller Seamaster, for example, wears a hell of a lot smaller. Like not just 36mm smaller, it seems to wear a lot smaller. So you can see I have a 6 3/4 inch wrist, and you can see the Seamaster on my wrist doesn't wear too bad at all. So I would say definitely try both full size and the smaller size and just get a feel for what you prefer, because you'll be quite surprised by how small those watches you've mentioned do wear. So that's something to keep in mind. Another good option, if you're looking for an affordable diver, now the ones you've mentioned, kind of a good range, is this L'Oreal. It's actually a very nice size watch. And because the dial is again very drawn inwards, and you've got this big crystal, again it warps the dial, so it brings your eyes even more inwards. So it seems to wear quite a bit smaller. So those are things to remember with regards to dive watches. But yeah, I hope you're all doing very well, guys. Any questions, feel free. This live, what have I missed? So we're talking about dive watches. So just going over a few misconceptions about depth rating and everything like that. We just discussed sizes of watches as well, because obviously dive watches typically are a lot bigger, and there are smaller offerings which a lot of people assume they'd prefer. Now the thing is, when you try them on, oftentimes it's not at all. Now this is the Turtle, which is a 46mm watch, but it wears incredibly well because it's got a short look to lug length. All things to consider with dive watches. But again, if you try on a smaller watch, a smaller dive watch, a 36mm Seamaster or a 36mm Tudor Sub, and you prefer the size of it, then go for it. You know, you got to buy what you like. Got to buy what you like. So typically on dive watches, you would have either bracelets, rubber straps. They're kind of your standards, and obviously NATO straps and things like that. Now, occasionally, brands release them on leather, which really upsets the purists because, well, leather isn't waterproof. Now, there are brands that claim to have waterproof leather. It's more of a water-resistant leather as opposed to a waterproof leather. There's not many brands, as far as I'm aware, that have made a completely waterproof leather that is actually leather. Now, oftentimes it's lined with other things and layered with other things to make it waterproof, and therefore it usually ends up not actually being leather. It ends up being more rubber than leather. So that's something to consider as well. If you are actually going to go swimming and diving, you probably don't want a leather strap. In terms of how they look, I think leather straps can look really cool on dive watches. It depends on the watch. It suits this watch well because of the size. This is the Black Bay 58, a really great watch, and I'll show it you on my wrist. And there it is on my wrist. Wears so well. I would personally go for the bracelet version over this, but that is just my personal preference. I know there's quite a few people out there who actually prefer it on a strap. So, and we have this one available in the store, so you can't go wrong. If swimming, do you recommend putting a rubber strap on? It really depends. So it depends on what dive watch you have and everything like that. So, and it depends what you're comfortable with. If you think you're not going to be comfortable wearing a chunkier metal bracelet in the water, and you're worried about maybe scratching it against things, then probably wear a rubber strap, you know, something like what this Tag Heuer has, because you haven't really got to worry about scratching it or getting it against anything, and it will wear well. Now the thing about swimming is you're not going to be going so far that you're going to expand massively. You might expand a little bit if it's warm water, just from the heat more than the actual water itself. Now, the reason I mention that is because when you dive or you're going diving with a wetsuit or anything like that, you need something that's going to stretch it out. And that is why brands have the option of dive extensions, or in the case of Rolex, a glide lock. So let's say that is where it fits on your wrist, you need to put it over a wetsuit, you pop that out, slide it up, and down it goes over your wetsuit. So those are things to consider. It depends on what you're doing. If you're swimming, I wouldn't worry too much. I think you can wear whatever you want and whatever you're comfortable with, as long as it's a watch that you can actually go swimming with. Anyone know what the record is for depth resistance on a wristwatch? I believe it was the new Omega that was released a little while ago. I can't remember the numbers, but it was absolutely insane and completely ridiculous. And obviously there's the one that went down to the Mariana Trench with James Cameron, the Rolex. That was either was the record holder or still is. I cannot remember. My daily wear is the OP36, and yes, I certainly understand your points due to the dive bezel. I would definitely be checking out the 36mm on the wrist and see how they are. Yeah, definitely. You know, the OP36 is a beautiful watch, but as I was saying, you know, it's mostly dial. So your eyes are drawn inwards to a mostly larger dial. Now, the dial on a dive watch is a similar size, but you have so much going on around it that your eyes are drawn more inwards, if that makes sense. So it does appear to be a lot smaller. So that's kind of where it's at with that sort of judgment. And again, you know, there's people who prefer it, and that's completely fine. It's just something that's worth mentioning and worth trying before that as well. Definitely. How's everyone getting on during this lockdown? What's everyone been up to and doing? So, another interesting dive watch we have on the table is this Christopher Ward. So this is the Trident Pro 600 in bronze. So we spoke a little bit about alternative metals yesterday. Bronze is an interesting one because it oxidizes and it reacts with different things in the air and salt and all kinds of different things. And what happens is it patinates. So it almost builds up a layer over the top of itself, which is reacting to the bronze and creating an exterior reaction. So it's sort of the same way silver oxidizes and everything like that. What it does, it creates a really interesting looking watch as it patinates. When you first get bronze, depending on the grade of bronze, because there's different grades of bronze and there's also brass and a few other materials, it almost looks like a very vibrant gold. And then as it starts to age, it starts to go this colour where it starts to dull down, which is really, really interesting. And obviously if you were to go diving with this watch, it would patinate a lot quicker depending on the water of which you're diving, you know, fresh water and things like that. So yeah. Vintage divers look amazing. Water resistance probably gone, but they do look good. Yeah, so as we're sort of on the subject of watches, well, obviously we're talking about watches, as we're on the subject of dive watches and water resistance, something to keep in mind is how old are watches and gaskets and all these different things. So you might buy, and this is why I say with anyone who buys a dive watch off me that's over a certain age and out of its manufacturing warranty, that if you want to actually go diving with it and test its actual depth and do real life diving, you need to get it pressure tested. Now the reason being, what keeps this watch water resistant is obviously a screwed down crown and a screwed down case back and a watertight case. Now what keeps it watertight in the screw down areas is a rubber gasket in most cases. Now I don't know if anyone has seen rubber that's been left for years, and what happens to it, it basically goes solid and can crumble in your hands. I don't know if any of you have ever taken apart a watch and seen an old rubber gasket in there that's been in there for a while. You can literally get it in your fingers and it just crumbles. Now that is what's stopping water getting in your watch. So whenever a watch gets serviced or pressure tested or pressure sealed, what they do is they replace the rubber gaskets and reseal and pressurize and put it in a chamber where they test to see if water gets in the case before putting the mechanism and everything back in. It's an important thing to mention because a lot of people buy pre-owned dive watches, not talking about vintage yet, we'll get onto that, but they buy pre-owned dive watches and expect to be able to go diving with them guaranteed. Now the thing you don't realise is you might be buying a watch that says 2018, for example, on the guarantee card. Now because it says 2018 on the guarantee card, that's when the guarantee begins. That's not necessarily when the watch was manufactured. It could have been manufactured 4 years ago, sat at their warehouse for 2 years before it went to a retailer, and sat with that retailer at their head office for another year before it even went into a store, and then another year before it even sold. You just don't know. So you might be getting a watch that looks to be, based on guarantee, only 2 years old, but really could be 4 or 5 years old. And it's an important thing to mention because that gasket has been sitting in there. So if you are going to go diving with your watches and you use them regularly for water sports or any water activities, get them pressure tested at least once a year, and just get the gaskets replaced and repressurized. It's very simple. There's places out there that do it, and it's not awfully expensive. It's not cheap either. But if you are going to be using these as they are intended to be used, you need to look after them as they are intended to be looked after. Important thing to mention. How you doing? How you doing, Lights Out Low? Neville Grimshaw, polishing my watches with a cloth. Bliss, yes, we have a Selvit right here. We can do the same. There we go. Patina is essentially a protective layer of oxidization on top of the metal. That's right, yeah. So, but then again, it depends on the metal and other things. So like gold, if gold patinas, it's usually a reaction within the gold and the mixture of gold, because what a lot of people don't realize is gold is based on purity, so that's why you have 9 carat, 18 carat, 14 carat, and everything like that. And that refers to the percentage of gold actually in the item. So if you ever see 9 carat gold, it's 0.375. Now what 0.375 means is it's 37.5% gold and the rest is other alloys. With 18 carat gold, it's 0.750, which means it's 75% gold and 25% other alloys. When gold patinas, it's actually a reaction of the remaining material and the gold itself combining and doing some weird stuff with time. Oftentimes that cannot be changed. Another thing is white gold. White gold doesn't technically exist. So, and what I mean by that is you don't mine white gold. White gold isn't a thing. You know, there's platinum and there's palladium, which are a white metal. Silver is white and things like that. But white gold doesn't exist. It's actually rhodium. So white gold is naturally a champagne colour, and it's made white by coating with rhodium. So the rhodium is what makes it white. Now there's brands that have learned how to mix the rhodium and the gold into a metal that makes it white all the way through, but typically white gold is champagne and made white with rhodium, and eventually that rhodium wears away and that champagne colour comes through. So I don't know if anyone's ever seen like a 1970s or 80s white gold day date, for example. Sometimes it's going a bit champagne in colour. Or if you've ever seen a white gold bezel on a 70s Datejust or 80s Datejust, again, sometimes that bezel looks slightly different in colour than the stainless steel because the white rhodium is starting to wear away. So that's the main differences. So yeah. And as we were saying about water, pressure testing, water resistancy, things like that, a rule of thumb by me, and this is personally me, and again, people will have different points of view and different opinions. Anything that's over that was sold or manufactured before the 1990s, in my opinion, we should not be classing them as waterproof. Now, if you've had them pressure tested and you've got the depth rating gauges and pressure slip and everything to say it can and is waterproof, fair enough, but do it at your own risk. A watch of that age is going to start deteriorating with its construction. Not always, not necessarily, but it's just not worth the risk in my opinion. You know, and even with some of these watches on the table, like, do you really need to be diving with your £5,000 to £10,000 watch? You know, is it necessary? If you want to go swimming with it, it's a different story, but just sort of be careful with them. Personally, I'd just say most watches aren't waterproof. You know, just don't go near water with them. There's no point. What movement is in the Christopher Ward? Lovely sweeping hand motion. Yeah, it's gorgeous. I believe it's a Solita SW200 or an ETA 2824. It's one or the other. See if it says it on the back. Nope. But it's one or the other. I can't remember. My apologies. It's a really cool watch. And the blue dial, you know, very similar to the Cobra Shear. This is a 43mm. They do a 43 and a 40mm. Both very, very nice. Signed crown with the Christopher Ward logo. Christopher Ward at 9 o'clock. It's the only thing that gets a few people. They say it's just not very symmetric in its design because there's absolutely nothing at 12. Now, I don't personally mind it at all. I think it looks quite nice. Williams watches, indeed. I was impressed with your gold plating knowledge on yesterday's stream, my friend. Thank you. Yeah, I worked in the jewellery industry for a while as well, so I know about gold and different metals and materials and stuff like that from my years of selling jewellery. And actually, have still occasionally dabble in selling jewellery and things like that. So yeah, you ever need any jewellery pieces, let me know, guys. I can get bespoke things made and everything like that. Yes, Salita, right. I'm in the process of making a 24 karat gold dial using palladium indices. I'm going to do a hand engraved one and textured dial similar to hand hammered. It's very interesting. I'll be interested to see how that obviously comes out and everything like that, because 24 karat gold is pure gold. It's 99.9% gold. The thing with gold is, and especially 24 karat, a lot of people don't realise, is you can literally bend it with your hands. It's a very supple material because it's pure gold. So that's why if you're ever buying gold anything, gold rings, gold chains, gold watches, most of the time the highest purity you will get is 18 karat. Because it's got enough alternative alloys, 25%, to make it a harder wearing material. Otherwise, you could literally bend like gold. If it was pure gold, you could whack it just hard enough and it would start to dent. So that's why most things aren't made out of 24 karat gold. But yeah, I'll be interested to see what that looks like. And obviously palladium, really interesting material, and a material that's just traded through the roof recently. So for those of you who don't know, platinum was kind of the top material based on its raw price. And the reason being was many factors. It was used in cars, it was used in the transistors, I want to say. I cannot remember, don't quote me on that. It was used in something in cars, and they switched over to palladium because palladium was cheaper. But as an actual metal, palladium and platinum are very, very similar. Platinum is a lot rarer than palladium in terms of how often you find it, and palladium is a very dense metal. It's a very dense, heavy, and very solid metal, and it's white all the way through, which makes it quite attractive over white gold. That's why you see some brands prefer to use platinum, because it is white all the way through. So yeah, it's quite interesting. I love how we've gone on to metals when we were talking about dive watches, but that's the fun about this stream. You know, I'm going to try and answer your questions and educate where I can. Obviously, I don't know everything. I mean, anyone who says they know everything is a liar. But I know a fair bit. I know a few things about different metals and things like that as well. So ask away, ask away. Let's take a look at the Bremont in the meantime. So we have this Bremont Submariner, the S500. So the S500 is different to the S300. So the main difference is the 500 is 500 meters water resistant, and you have the crown here at 2. That's usually why it has. Now this movement does have a GMT function as well, which is really cool. So Paul the long sleeve collector, good morning from Washington DC. Stay healthy and safe. Thank you, you too, my friend, and thank you for tuning in. So I'll show you this. So this is the Bremont S500 Submariner. They made it in a limited production run of 300 watches. Sorry, 300 watches. It's GMT diver with a really, really cool textured dial, a cool sort of sapphire bezel, and a independently operating GMT. Sorry, just give me a second. I'm trying to figure out. There we go. Which is very cool, because usually, or not usually, some movements have a independently set in hour hand, which is where you change the whole time and then change the hour hand to adjust that. But you can see the dial, the texture, the indices, really cool watch. Comes on this rubber strap, which is very, very nice, and you have an exhibition case back right there as well with their customized rotor. I think Bremont offers some really interesting and awesome pieces. You've got a helium escape valve in the case there, and Bremont offer a slightly different case. It's called a triptych case. So it's 3 pieces that are combined together to make the case, and you have the center, which is basically almost like a rubber, and it has built-in shock resistance and things like that. I can't remember if this one has it. I know there's some Bremonts that don't have that. And this might be one of them, but it is a cool watch nonetheless. Some very cool technology and design, and the cases were made, again, I'm not too sure if they still are, they were made in Silverstone, using the same equipment that some of the cars and things were made. Really cool brand, really, really cool brand. But yeah, guys, if you have any questions on dive watches or anything in general, just feel free to ask it. But whilst I am trying to create some structure to these based on the last episode, which was very all over the place, but there was a lot of great questions. So sort of talking about different things. Maybe tomorrow we'll do chronographs or something. I don't know. We'll switch and swap, and obviously any suggestions, I'm all ears. This is something I'd like to turn into a regular thing, even after the lockdown. You know, maybe talk about different stuff, and have better equipment to do so. Obviously, using what we got right now. What's the purpose of the escape valve? So the escape valves is for helium. So when you deep sea dive, and you do saturation diving or any form of mixed gas diving, you will experience helium. So helium is everywhere, and helium can get in everything. So it can get in your watch, and it will, most importantly, get in you. And that's why if you do saturation diving and you go deep down and you experience mixed gases, you have to come up in stages. So rather than coming all the way up, you have to come up in intervals. The reason being, if you come all the way up, you'll get what's called the bends, and that's where the helium gets in mixed with your blood, and it can kill you. It can basically make lungs and things explode because it pressurizes inside and it can pop. There's famous stories of divers out there who this has happened to, and it's very unfortunate and it's very, very sad. Now obviously a watch is no exception. It can happen as well, and helium can get trapped in here, and if you come up too fast, it can pop the glass or everything out, just explode the watch basically, because it pressurizes inside and makes it explode. Now that's the reason you have helium escape valves. I've picked up a watch that obviously doesn't have one, like a Muppet. So you have helium escape valves to release the helium as you come up in your intervals, so the helium can escape without interfering with the watch and letting water in. So watches that have helium escape valves, obviously the Seamaster has it as this extra crown, or the wart, as some people call it, and some watches have it built into the case, which is a more typically used format because you don't have to do anything and it automatically releases. The way it works is the pressure starts pushing against the crown, and it allows, again, each one is a little bit different, but it basically works as like a bob, you know, like in a water, where the pressure hits it and it moves up, and what it does, it allows that gas to come out without letting anything else in. That's usually how they work, and that's the reason you have them. But you only really need that if you are saturation diving or mixed gas diving or anything like that. If you are just recreationally diving, which is usually 20 meters or so, sometimes even a lot less or a little bit more, you're fine with just your normal watch. Again, some watches are rated different, so I believe the Prospex line is ISO certified, which is a certification rating where they are tested in more vigorous detail than just a standard rating depth, which is usually, again, as we discussed earlier, pressurized rating. So that's something to bear in mind as well. Now, one thing to bear in mind, most watches, dive watches, are rated around 200 meters, obviously some more. When you saturation dive, you don't go 200 meters, you don't really go anywhere near that. So you're never going to actually need the crazy ratings that some of these watches have. So yeah. Williams watches, I'm using 24 karat Indian gold, and the dial will be milled thicker than the usual 2 millimeters. 24 karat gold can be used in jewelry, no problem. It's just costly, as you do need to use more. Yeah, so the thing with, you said Indian gold is usually a lot more yellow than standard 24 or standard gold in general. Again, 24 karat gold, as you said, can be used in jewelry. Oftentimes it isn't. There's a reason most places will have 9 and 18 karat, because the moment you start going more and it becomes purer gold, that's the whole point of rating. So 24K is 99.9 karat gold, and jewelers just don't usually like to use it in jewelry because it's so sort of it's a weak metal, really. You know, gold is not intended to be used in that way, and that's why if you get gold bullion, it's pure gold and things like that. But yeah, I'll be interested to see what that looks like, and obviously 2 millimeters is a bit thicker, so yeah. Flame Zoom, another thing about helium as well, it tends to kill certain smartphones like iPhones. There you go. How you doing, Flame? How you doing? William watches, the blue on the Seiko is stunning. Yeah, I agree. There's quite a few blue watches on the table right now, so let's take a look at them. Got a few different blues. Look at these. Alright. Try and get a bit of focus. Again, you'll have to forgive me, guys. I am using a webcam that doesn't like to autofocus, so I'm having to manually focus, and I've got a tiny little screen to base the focus on. So apologies if it's not in focus. But here's 3 different blues. We've got blue ceramic. We've got whatever they use on these, I'm not too sure. Blue ceramic bezel on the Accuracer. A really cool textured dial on the Accuracer. So let me show you these and we'll go in a bit more detail. So over here is the accurator that a lot of people give a lot of flack. It has a really nice blue textured dial, nice blue ceramic bezel. Oftentimes brands struggle to match the same blue because ceramic, the way ceramic sort of captivates colour is very different. So oftentimes you don't get the exact same blue, and that is the case here. The blue on the rubber is very similar to the blue on the dial, whereas the blue on the bezel is slightly different, and that's usually the case. But gorgeous nonetheless. And again, you have a very similar thing here. Even though this isn't ceramic, it's a different blue, but a really gorgeous blue. You can see the textures on the dial right there. Let me see if I can. Yes, this is getting some decent focus. You can see you got the fin there at around 8 o'clock. Really cool. And you got the counterweight, which is also a fin. This is a Save the Ocean model, and the bezel is the first time they used this new textured bezel. I don't know if you guys can see that, but the bezel has a really cool texture. There you go. It's almost like a record. Gorgeous watch, and the lume is much thicker on the dial as well. They did quite a few changes with this model, and this isn't the King Seiko where they've done even more changes, but a cool watch nonetheless. And then finally, the watch that has the exact same colour on the dial as it does the bezel, because it is ceramic. So they use a ceramic dial and a ceramic bezel, which creates for this really gorgeous, deep, rich blue that won't change in colour. So ceramic is immune to the normal things that happen to watches over time. So very cool. What's the dressiest diver in your opinion? The ones you can sort of get away wearing with work clothes, etc. Maybe Blancpain. Yeah, the Blancpain 50 fathoms is a really nice choice. The only issue is the size. Oftentimes they're very large. They do a smaller one that you could totally use. It really depends, you know, the sort of definition. Hello Stephen, how you doing? Scale bezels are my favourite. Yes, yeah, they are very cool. So Paul, back to yours. The thing with a dress watch is it's changed over time. You know, a dress watch used to be incredibly thin, incredibly classic. Usually didn't even have a second hand. You know, we're talking about Cartier more than anything here. That used to be the definition of a dress watch. Very close to what you'd expect for a sort of black tie event. You know, where it's incredibly clean, incredibly classic. Now we see, you know, there's some of the most well-dressed men in the world in the most formal attire wearing a Submariner. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, the definition has changed. So I'd say it really comes down to what you prefer. You know, I think what the Black Bay 58 offers is very good in different situations of dress code and everything like that. You know, you've got the use of gilt, so gold on there, which just gives it that nice little pop, and a little bit dressier, nice red on the triangle as well. I think it offers a good balance of both diver, sporty and dressy when you need it to be, as you can see on the strap. Yeah, I think a lot of people don't really care anymore about what watch you wear in their dressy occasions. You know, I've got what else have I got that's quite dressy? So this is quite a dressy piece as well. This is not a dive watch, obviously. The Omega Seamaster from 1968 Jumbo chronometer. So that's quite a mouthful. What you have is 18 karat gold in quite a thick case, very beautiful condition. 1968, so the condition is incredible for that age. And you have a chronometer movement in the Seamaster, which is quite rare. So the chronometer movements were typically restrained for the Constellation because of the time it went. It usually went Geneve and DeVille and Seamaster and then Constellation. Obviously there's other models, but that's kind of the way it went. And the Constellation was more expensive because it used higher quality parts and a better movement typically. Now the movement in here I believe is the 564, which is the same caliber used in the Constellations. So you have all that beauty that you get with a Constellation, but in a Seamaster in 37mm, which is really cool. It's a gorgeous piece. So this is quite a dressy watch, but again, some people would, you know, purists would say no because it's got a date and it's got a second hand. You know, a dress watch should be pure simplicity, you know. But again, things change, tastes change. However, this is gorgeous. Look at it. I mean, just look at the Seamaster on the back. Perfect piece. Yeah, I'll be sure to send you some pictures of the dials once completed and cased. I've already sourced the ETA hand wound movements too. I'm really looking forward to completing the watch. Yeah, it sounds awesome. It sounds very, very awesome. I look forward to seeing it. You'll have to tag me in a few bits on Instagram and stuff, or email me some stuff. I'd be more than interested to see. And once it's done, you know, if you're in the UK, I'd be very interested in seeing it in person as well. Steve, your collection has changed very much. It's better since the beginning. I'm impressed. Good for you. Thank you. So the personal collection certainly has gone through many, many changes. Everything you see on the table isn't my personal collection. It's the stock for the website, for the store, for Kibble Watches, my business. So whilst I do get to enjoy these pieces, they're technically the company's, or they are consignment pieces, so they are collector's pieces that I'm selling for them through the website. Which is something I offer that not a lot of people do. It's kind of what's made the business grow, really. But the personal collection has gone through many stages. I had obviously the Tudor Black Bay 36, I had a Speedmaster Reduced, I had an Oris, I had all these really incredible watches all in one at one time, and I had to sell them all to start funding the business. So the personal collection has changed a lot, but I'm happy with it. And at the end of the day, you know, I get to enjoy the pieces you see. So yeah. Beautiful Amiga in great condition for the age, very sharp. No, 100%. It's an incredibly rare example as well. I believe there's one or two others out there for sale, and they're stainless steel rather than 18 karat gold. Hello Navsan, how you doing? How are you doing? Pete's Anyone, the best diver watch is the Sunto D5. The only place you see it on Instagram. So let's get a photo of that up for you guys. But how are you doing, Navsan? Where are you staying whilst in lockdown? Sunto D5. So this is the one he's referring to, right there. Probably pronouncing it wrong, but yeah. So it's basically you know, as we were talking earlier, a dive computer. So if you are actually diving and you're actually doing those kind of activities, use a diving computer. Don't use a watch. You know, if you want to wear a watch, then obviously know the limits, know what you need to know. Do your due diligence, because you might just end up breaking your watch unnecessarily or absolutely not using it. So yeah. Yeah, sure, James. I'm based in the UK, Leicestershire. I'll be sure to reach out. Well, that's very coincidental because I'm originally from Leicester. My family live in Leicester, and I try and go down as often as possible. So very, very close. We'll have to certainly meet up, get a few drinks once all this is over, and we don't have to keep 6 feet apart or whatever it is, or just not travel at all. I am drinking a Red Bull at the moment, which is very good for you. Very good for you. Thank you for everyone who's come out to watch the stream. Really appreciate it, guys. We've been going about 42 minutes, so if anyone's got any other questions, you know, feel free to ask them, and more than happy to answer them. Again, you know, I'm trying to develop this series. At the end of the day, it's just something that's a bit of fun during the lockdown. Hopefully keep you guys entertained, and these get to stay on YouTube so people can watch them. Try and educate where I can, and obviously just involve you guys with questions. So yeah, we'll sort of develop it. Each day I'll try and do one of these, maybe not every single day, but most days, and I will announce it in advance. And try and create a subject just to give it a bit more structure, because the first one yesterday was just all over the place. You know, people seem to enjoy it, and luckily everyone was asking a lot of questions, which helped. But when people aren't asking questions, there needs to be sort of a subject to go back to. So that's why we chose dive watches today. And to those of you who have recently just tuned in, there was quite a bit of conversation at the start about dive watching and different things, but feel free to go back and watch it later. Now San says, sadly back in the UK, I was safer in Hong Kong, but come home for family. Fair enough, man. Fair enough. We need to meet up for a drink or food once all this is over. And next time you're around the UK, we've never actually met after all this time. It'd be good to finally meet you. But yeah, good stuff. I'll be back. Yeah. Well, guys, if there's no more questions, I think we'll call it there. It's been a good 45-minute live stream. I think people have enjoyed it, hopefully. And guys, I look forward to hearing your feedback. If you're not subscribed, make sure you already are. Obviously, follow on Instagram. That's where most of it happens. Check out the website if you're in the market for a new watch or you want to sell your watch. And yeah, any questions, leave them down below, and we'll cover them maybe in the next one, which hopefully will be tomorrow. But we will see. So thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you all next time. Stay safe, and remember, wash your hands. Wash your hands. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.